I'd like to welcome everybody to our 22nd. This is our non-dinner event because we had no complaints from everybody. I think everybody was more than happy to help the organization and not have to sit through a dinner. So instead, what we're going to do is take this opportunity to describe what we do. If you look at the friends around me right now, this is how we're going to do it. We have myself, the director of the organization, have Aviler, our social worker for 10, 12 years already, something like that, give or take. We have Yehuda Friedland, who's our executive director, and we have Leibel Schwartz, who, while not a official capacity and not even a client of HaRav, but he's been living along with HaRav for the last, 10, 11 years already, and he has a great view of what it is. So I figure from all of this, we could have a perspective, and we could convey to you what HaRav actually does. I'd like to give a 1-minute introduction, then I'm going to be quiet for a while, and everyone's going to join in. This is going to be so exciting. So, interesting enough, while we're around for 22 years, people do ask either myself or they ask board members, they go, what is HaRav doing this day? And I find it interesting because we're actually doing the same thing we've been doing for 22 years. I believe they ask this question because we're quite low-key. I don't think we send out thousands of emails, even by our dinner was once a week. We're not constantly all excited, and this is cynical, I apologize, with our organizations are so excited. If somebody chas v'shalom has a suicide, they then send emails out for that, and we don't do that. We're very low-key, we're very subtle, and it reflects on our work. We don't do the exciting things of programming, and we're taking them places, and we're making trips or anything like that. Day by day, you're going to hold a job, you're going to learn how to say thank you, you're going to learn how to say please. You're just going to do all the little things which you're supposed to do in real life, and it's our personality. I think it's our personality and how we present ourselves to people we ask for assistance, how we present ourselves marketing, and how we present ourselves to the boys and the girls that we do our work. So we do 4 things. One of the things we do is we mentor. So we'll mentor both the teenagers on ongoing, and we're also going to mentor the parents constantly, whether we speak to the teenagers at all. And therefore, we'll speak to them every day. Yes, your kid's going to come home, he's going to be in a bad mood. Here's how I think you should react. We do that. The second thing we do is we do referrals, which is both school placements and jobs and apartments and stuff like that. But it's also a lot of discharge planning when they come out of psych wards and rehabs and stuff. We do a lot of the discharge planning and a lot of, like I said, more of the subtle stuff as well. The third thing we do is we do a lot of educational. So there's the Torah Anytime, there's the weekly newsletters, they're found in shuls, and we train in various rabbeim and teachers. That's the third thing. And the fourth thing is housing, and we've increased from 3 houses, we now have 5 houses for boys. We actually have a house for girls. The house for girls, I have to tell you, is probably as complex as the 5 houses for boys. But that's what we do, the same thing we've always done. So if somebody's going to ask you, so tell me, what do we do? The answer is the same thing we've always been doing. Now, this is my version of what it is. I'd like to ask Avi, because I know that while we deal with the same boys and we deal with the same everything, we have different perspective of it. That's our personalities. He's also a clinician. As a result, he sees things very differently. I see it from a mentor-based, maybe an intense mentor-based, and I'm trying to do a lot of behavior modification, but we do clash in a very friendly way because I'm thinking of this, call it, he would say in an amateur way, I would say a practical way, and I would say that he's too much of a clinician for me, but nonetheless he does great work. So give me my 30 seconds.
No, so first of all, I would add that I think that the 4 things that you mentioned, I really think that they're all kind of the same, in that the common thread among them is that the goal of HaRav, I guess you could say, although there's no crystal clear mission, is to help people in the community, whether it's locally or further away, who are dealing with some kind of crisis or emerging crisis, to be able, through a proper chinuch perspective, to deal with the situation and to get things under control. Sometimes that means with teenagers that come to us, helping them find a job and helping them kind of learn to thrive, learn to get on their own 2 feet. Sometimes it's with parents who are struggling, not knowing how to respond to teenagers, helping them to understand or to make peace between them so that the relationship that they have can be mended in some way. And even the Torah Anytime, the ones that I've seen a lot of them, it seems like the thread of the message between all of them is how to behave in a way that you and your family and in your community can kind of get along and be functional. And that's a word that we use a lot over here, is functional. Right. The goal, I think, is with the guys that we have, at least in the residents, and even those that we see peripherally that are either already graduated, so to speak, from our residences, or those that we just see who've never been part of our residences, but we just go to visit them, take them out for lunch or things like that. The goal is always to get them to be functional. And what that means is not just that they get out of bed and they actually go daven or have a normal schedule, but also that they can have a spouse, they can get along, and they can they have, Rabbi Gluck likes to use the word the reciprocal relationships.
Right.
A lot of times people come to us and either they've been handed things in a way where there was no expectation of return, or they didn't learn through social cues, either because there's a disability or something else, how to have that kind of a relationship. And again, I think the thread of all the things that you mentioned is that we try to train them and get them to understand how to have a relationship, how to get along with people, how to function in a normal house or a normal job or things like that.
How do you train soft skills?
When you say soft skills, what do you mean?
These soft skills you're talking about. I mean, I could train you how to run an Excel sheet, but the idea of social cues, social norms, the little things, how do you train
it's
them?
a great question. I think there's really two ways to go about it. The proper way for a child or a teenager or a young adult who has some type of a disability, whether it's being on the autistic spectrum or having maybe had suffered through ADHD and therefore never having had the calmness to be able to have a normal relationship that's kind of like baseline, is really through example. And so if you have a relationship with a 16-year-old who's never had a proper relationship in that way, and you hold him to certain, not with aggression and not with confrontation, but just expect of him and show that you have an expectation from him of how he's supposed to behave with you, and he likes you and he gets along with you, which again is a major component of what we do, that they should like us and feel comfortable with us, then hopefully the expectation is they'll use that and take it out. So from a clinical perspective, if you have a child who's coming to you with attachment disorders, and what that means is that, within his family or with his rebbeim, wherever he was, either due to a learning disability or some type of other impulsivity that he had, he was not able to kind of attach and feel that there was somebody that was there for him that wasn't going to neglect him or not be there the next day, wasn't going to be mad one day and happy the other day. If a person comes to us with that kind of a background and we're able to be consistent and loving and fair, and maybe they've never seen that before, that is very eye-opening to them. That kind of helps them to recognize that's how you need to behave with the world around you.
We're creating a norm that they've never seen. They didn't know you're supposed to say please, and if they say please, they would have been screamed at, so it was never part of the language. So we just create a norm, and then if we do it consistently enough, they actually will often pick up on it. And then we had a boy whose parents would wake up at 11 in the morning and 12 in the morning. So there was no norm of waking up in the morning, because who does, right? Who does? So even though in the school they may have, but that was an alternative norm. And then we've created a norm. The first week or two, I dragged him out of bed. The next week or two, I stood in my car, taking him to work, stood in front of the house. The next week, I screamed at him. Next week said, man, it's costing you an Uber. We're just not doing this anymore, And I actually texted the guy at 7:30 today. Guy texted back at 7:31. This is AM, mind you.
Right.
It's a fascinating, and part of it, by the way, is a lot of people don't attempt things, particularly teenagers, but even adults, is because they don't think it'll matter. And part of the big thing we do is we let them know it matters. When you make a good move, you keep your job. And when you don't make a good move, you don't keep your job. And when they learn that they actually can make a difference in their life, they rise to the challenge. Because
is it interesting when they get that first realization?
It is very, very interesting. The most interesting thing is on this same thing, that somebody will call me up with a crisis. And I do something which is very effective, which my wife hates and my family hates, because nobody wants you to play with them. I go, okay, this is a challenge. It's manageable. Take a deep breath. Let's figure this out. Let's figure out what this problem is. I go, okay, here's what you need to do. Go online and do this, and then call me back. That's probably going to solve a 30-year problem. Then you call me back. And then I was doing this repeatedly with one guy, and he says, I now know I could do anything. If I don't know the answer, Rabbi Google knows the answer. You know that. If Rabbi Google doesn't know the answer, then he's going to call me or somebody up, and they'll say, I'll talk to so-and-so. I think he went through this. And every problem is manageable now. That's crazy, he says. I never knew that, right? And now we just handle it. And he had some things that he went through. It was amazing. He handled it so calmly. There is another challenge we have, and this you'll talk about more, I'm sure. Everyone's got anxiety today. It's sad that everyone's an exaggeration, but we're free speaking here, so we'll use the word everyone. But even though there's a lot of
Not
anxiety.
everyone is exaggerating.
No.
Some people really are.
You know what it is? Everyone besides us, and I'm not so
Freaking.
sure about you guys, that type of a conversation, everyone besides us. There's a lot of anxiety, and they truly, so I was telling my mother says, you know what he needs? You go to the library, this is my mother, you go to the library and you get the biggest book on psychology you could find, you come home and hit him on the head with it. That's like the old European form of psychology. So I said, Ma, it used to be they didn't want to. Now they're incapable. So a lot of kids, and parents still do this, they throw them out of the house, or they take away their allowance, or they don't understand the kid doesn't have the skills to do it even if they want it. And if you have a lot of anxiety, so a lot of things that for you and I are just natural, they truly freeze. They just can't. And in our environment, we lower anxiety to whatever degree we can. And whether sometimes it's a medication, I used to be very against medication, but it's an evil necessity and sometimes not so evil actually, right? Or we do it by teaching skills, and then they think they can, and that's great. So I brought you two guys here, right? First of all, we have to fill the table up, so that's a good reason to bring you together. But also, you just deal with the administrative. But I presume that in the background, you hear and see things. So do you have like 2 minutes of anything you hear and see?
Well, what I want to say that the feedback that we get, I deal a lot with the parents. I deal with the parents for the administration and the tuitions and ongoing. Very often they're the person I call, certainly not for the therapeutic element, but just to find out if the kids' needs are taken care of sometimes, and sometimes if they can't get through to somebody else. But certainly, when for the intake process, I speak to the parents, and very often they call me and they're very nervous. What's HaRav going to do for my son or my daughter?
Right.
Since we started with the girls program.
Right.
And, they tell me all the kids' issues, and even though I don't understand them, because that's not my job, I deal only with the
But you nod your head very knowingly.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic, and I pretend that I sort of know what they're going through, and I can empathize. And then, like I said, they're very wary. I'm sending him away. He can't be home. He can't be here. So we're sending him to HaRavim. And what's he going to experience? What's it going to be like? You're going to take care of him. You're going to help him. And if I speak to them again, even a few weeks later, certainly a few months later, then the feedback is tremendous. Now he's calling home more. He sounds more calm, more stable. We're happier. He's happier. So
the parents are for sure happier because the kids by us.
So if they're simply out of the house,
they're happy.
That's one thing.
They're happier.
Right, but
it must be interesting to hear that, like to be in that space where you literally hear that moment of transition.
Right. So I don't speak to the parents about, we're doing this, we're helping him in this way, or he was taken out to lunch, or he was he has a job. I'm not so involved in that. I'm usually not involved in that at all. So I don't talk to them about that. But just sort of generalized, in the past 2 months, we can recognize a change, and we're happy with the fact that he's here in Hilbert, here in HaRavim.
So let me give you a conversation from day one till the month they call you. What happens is they call me a week later, and they say, "What are you doing for my kid?" Right? And as I don't see you doing anything, he's home in the house all day.
The first or second, and sometimes the third.
I don't
complaining.
I don't see what you're doing. Why am I paying money? Because we don't charge for services other than those that live in our houses. I don't understand what you're doing. Why are you doing? And I say, listen. I say, just give us a little while. We don't really do anything. It's a lot of intangible. I can't even describe it, although I will, if you like. Just give me a week or two. And then when they're really angry, I say, I could bring your kid back if you'd like. And they go, no. I think you're doing great work. And then a month later, they say, I still don't know what you're doing. My kid doesn't, I don't know what's going on, but keep doing it. And it's all that we've described before. It's this subtle, intangible calmness. What they don't understand is, and maybe we don't want to record this, but I don't understand is, we put parents into perspective as well, because it's a very weird thing. On one hand, they don't like them, sometimes, obviously not every case, and some parents are great partners and the kids love them. But a lot of times the kids are very agitated to parents, either deservingly or not. And at the other hand, what the kids don't know is they put them on a pedestal, because you always put your parents on a pedestal, even if you don't like them. And that gap between pedestal and that is creates a lot of friction. We convey to them, they could be good people and didn't get it right, or they could have got it right and it didn't work. And we put a lot of things into perspective. And when you put things into perspective, the world seems fairer now, right? I tell people, they go, how are you doing? I says, I'm doing great, even though things aren't good, right? It's a perspective that we naturally understand. We give the kids a perspective. They could be wrong and still good people. Shmuel Kamenetsky once told me about an incident. He says, I wasn't upset at the person because they're right. I'm just more right. Which means, but that's a balanced perspective. In other words, from that person's angle, they are 100% right. I don't have an angle because I'm objective. I'm not in the story. I'm more right. And you get used to it that it's not black and white, because often the parents as adults present it as black and white, so the kid has no choice but to again present it as black and white, but in the other direction. And therefore they're calmer and they can talk to their parents, and therefore the parents see the change.
Sometimes it's interesting. I watch the guys over the years come in and watch them transition from where they want to be. I remember there was a guy that came in once and he said, Label, I'm not waking up for the first 6 months. After 6 months on the dot, I'm up for shachris.
Is this in 29 with Smith?
Yeah.
I know you're talking about.
Yeah. So after 6 months, I'm up for shachris. So I said, okay, right? And yeah, right, yeah. 6 months on the dot, doesn't get out of bed. So I said, okay, left him. That day later on, he says, you didn't get me up. I said, I knocked. Get me up. So the next day, we got him up.
Dragged him out?
Yeah. And slowly but surely, you see the progress. You see the process. And it was a 6-month process just for the first step. Right? They vegetated, and Rebbe says they grow mold on each side, right?
Right.
So they vegetated for 6 months. Then they got the knock. And then at a certain point, it's fascinating to watch them. You just see them become...
And you know the reward? I made his shidduch.
He's married?
Oh, then we're talking about another guy that told me this. Another guy.
Really?
Yeah, it's another guy. Yeah. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
But okay, that's it.
But the weirdest part is to see in the Hilburn community, to see guys by us doing well, growing, and then to see them start making families.
That's always interesting.
Very interesting. And to see that responsibility go from, yeah, it's nice you buy your Shabbos table and we taught you how to say please and thank you, to then going to their Shabbos table or seeing them together and seeing them say please and thank you, right?
It's even more. When they're by us, we have a leadership role in the sense, do this. And then they're married and they're acting as leaders in their little own home doing that. It's not only they're doing it right, they are showing you how to do it right. It's very fascinating. But the trick is, while there's no question that some professionals will say you need professionals for this, the trick is it's a lot of very basic stuff. Consistent, calm, balanced, just keep feeding them with it. Obviously you need some therapeutic intervention, maybe even a lot with some of it, but a lot of it's very foundational and people forget that. It's just all foundational. You want to argue with me, Doug?
No, I agree.
Oh, there you go.
Absolutely true.
That's what it is.
And I can say one thing I do have a handle on is the articles and the videos, because all of them go through me. I proofread all the articles.
Right.
Not that they need much.
No. I tell everybody that English is a second language. The challenge is I don't have a first language. So that's my challenge with that.
And the videos. So we're talking about, an article a week, a Dvar Torah in the Parsha every week, at least 2 videos a week. We were doing 3 at one point. So there's a lot of material that goes through my hands and through my computer. And even though there's always a chiddush, every time there's an article, there's something new. And there's a new thought, but like the Rabbi's saying, it's all foundational stuff. A lot of consistent themes, consistent messages, and consistency. There's a lot of...
Well, the way we describe it is like, you'll like this, is like a diamond. A diamond is when you start your life, everything is simple. Give me what I want. And then life as you get into it gets more complex, right? But then when you start maturing, it comes back to some very basic stuff. There's really only 1 or 2 things you need to know, and then it may be splinters, but yeah, it's all about balance and it's all about grounded stuff.
One of the constant themes that I've noticed, and again, I'm not coming from the position of a mental health person, but just from what I read, is that when it comes to issues, when people come to HaRav with problems, they're usually big, unsolvable problems. And they're very multifaceted. That's why I thought you were going with the diamond.
Okay.
But
you've seen one diamond, you've seen it.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And I notice very often the approach is that it's broken down into smaller, manageable, is that the word you use? Right. Manageable components. And each one is dealt with, on its own merits. Right. And once you see the big boulder broken up into many little stones, you're able to deal with one individually. And it's a mindset. And I think that comes across a lot. That's something that I found very meaningful, and I think you can tell me, but I think it's been very helpful.
Sometimes it's even interesting because they come to me with a problem over here, and I say, okay, we need to do this, and they say, how's that going to help me with the other problem? So I say, you're going to either have to trust me or not, because, for instance, on the most basic thing, you've probably seen this a lot, and that is that people come in with shalom bayis. And then you talk to them once or twice. It has nothing to do with shalom bayis. He has personal issues, she has personal, but now they're married, and therefore, right? But I can't see them together because it's not a marital issue. So I see him and I see her, then maybe afterwards we obviously sit together. But breaking it into simple pieces, we go back 5-6 steps. And then it really boils down to the fact that somebody's insecure or somebody's self-absorbed or this or that. And therefore I got to go there all the way early on.
Right. The cases present with symptoms.
Right. And people usually...
It's like going to the doctor.
They don't necessarily connect the fact that sometimes it's just an outside eye looking at it. It's like so obvious, like you're insecure, you have trauma history, you have...
Right.
It's not just a symptom.
And it's got nothing to do with marriage. I can't solve the marriage. I can solve the human. And when you solve the human, then the marriage can solve itself.
But the interesting part is that it's really maybe nothing wrong with the marriage. Meaning, if you take, Rebbe talks about a vacuum often. If we lived in a vacuum and there was no mortgage and there was no stress from the kids and there was no tuitions, we actually might really get along.
Correct. That's right. But I can't manage money problems, and this one can't manage having too many moving parts in the life, meaning the children and older parents and all this stuff, right? And therefore, there's a challenge. But if we just recognize it even, it becomes a little easier as well. Just because we know that it's not him, it's not her, it's just that there's not enough money. And
sometimes, again, I don't know if this is what you were saying, that if the woman realizes it's because I have a certain insecurity, or the guy realizes it's because I have a certain perfectionism in me.
Huge difference.
Right away, before even solving that core issue,
the awareness,
being aware of it and knowing that's why I'm having a problem with her, or that's why I'm having a problem with him.
Everywhere.
It goes away.
But it's not, they see it here, they see it at work, they see it at home, they see it with their kids. That thing
carries over for sure.
I tell people sometimes they're angry at whoever. And I tell them, you shouldn't be angry, you should be frustrated. But once you're frustrated, right, because it's not their fault, now you should just have pity, because they were brought up like that. Now, anger scars you. Frustration plays noise in your head. Pity is healing to a degree. And then the next step, by the way, you say is just focus on how much you're contributing to the problem as well, I've had parents tell me their kid's this and their kid's that, and I go, you gave birth to the kid. I mean, really? Can you please take a little of the contribution on this? You gave birth to the kid. But they don't see any contribution to the problem. One parent, I said, it's your DNA talking to you right now, you don't see it's your own DNA, but that's it. And we go back and back, and then it becomes pity. And when it's pity motivates me, it gives me energy. I'd now like to ask my friend Rabbi Eliezer Lieff, Rosh Yeshiva of South Monsey, to say a few words in honor of this event. Rabbi Lieff, thank you so much for giving us the time.
The brisa of Rabbi Shmuel that teaches us 13 midos, 13 rules of how the Torah is taught, the dreshas by him. And from the 13, there's 2 that I'd like to discuss. And perhaps with this understanding, come to an understanding of what Rabbi Glock and the Areivim organization means to all of us. One of the midos that Torah nidreshes is klal uprat. The Torah uses klal uprat to teach us, for example, by korbanos, that whatever is in the prat is permitted for a korban. The klal uprat is to teach me that the klal is only what's in the prat. Pratu klal is the opposite. Everything is included in the klal. But the Torah is telling me pratu klal, not to say specific prat, only an individual prat. For example, Be'ashavas Aveda. There it tells me different types of Avedas, but then it says the klal. These are only 4 examples, but there's so many more. So pratu klal is teaching us everything in the klal. Doesn't exclude anything. question is, if Klal Uprat is only teaching you the Prat, and Prat Klal is only teaching you the Klal, so what's the necessity to have the Klal Prat to have the Klal, and by Prat Klal, why is it necessary to have the Prat just say the Klal? The Mashgiach of Mir, Rabbi Yerucham, explains Klal Prat. He says a person is important, but he has to know that he's part of the Klal. So even though the Torah is only being Marba Prat, but the Torah is coming to say that this Prat, its chashivas is because it's part of a Klal. So, for example, by a carbon, person's bringing a carbon, so it's telling you different behemoths that you could bring, but only those behemoths that specifically mentioned the Torah could you bring. But perhaps the mindset, using Rabbi Yerucham's approach, is that you may be bringing this carbon, but you have to know that your connection to the Rabbeinu Shalom and your importance is because you're part of a klal, even though you're bringing this specific carbon. You may be an usher, someone else is an ani, you may be bringing a bigger animal, he's bringing a smaller animal, or perhaps some other type of carbon. You're all part of a klal. That's the important thing, important message. Pradu klal, if so, based on this approach of Rabbi Yerucham, is the opposite. That the prat is very important. And the person has to know he's the prat. Now, it includes all the klal, but you may be lost in the klal, thinking that you're just part of the klal. Here we specifically say just the opposite. You should know, never lose sight on the prat. Never lose sight on the individual. And that's perhaps a Shavas Aveda, where a person takes from his precious time to return Aveda to that person. He's thinking about that individual as a prat. The truth is, all Avedas you have to return. But you have to look at each Aveda that you're returning as a prat, as individual, and that's its chashivas. The organization HaRaivim and Rabbi Glock specifically have two approaches in how they help Klal Yisrael. There's the Klal Uprat approach, where the Klal is of importance, but only when they realize that there's a Klal out there of people that need help. And very often, the avodah of Rabbi Glock is to take an individual who has separated himself from the klal and make him realize he has responsibility and accountability to the klal. That could be done through the homes that he has for young men and young women, or connecting them to working somewhere in an organization that brings them understanding that they have to be part of a klal. But at the same time, even though he's able to teach the klal and bring individuals into understanding and embracing of the klal understanding, and he teaches klal by teaching them parenting and different lessons that he teaches to the klal at large, he is very, very intent on making sure that when the individual needs it, he doesn't get swallowed up by the klal. He's looked at as individual, special, and that he does so often, for hours at a time. I know of a young man where his mother approached Rabbi Glock for some help, and he took him out once a week for many, many weeks to speak to him, to give him that individualized attention. Many organizations could deal with the klal, many deal with the prat, but Rabbi Glock and HaRaivim are special in this way that they understand klal or prat, understand prat or klal. And these are the midas shatayna dreshes. This is the way you bring someone closer to Torah, to Rabbeinu Shalom, to Avas Yisrael. Sometimes Rabbi Glock and the people of HaRaivim have to give techacha, whether it's to a parent or it's to a young man or a young lady, reproof them. And they're very effective at that too. In counseling people, sometimes giving them over very strong directives. And yet he accomplishes it. He's able to do it. People listen to him. People follow him. What's the secret of Rabbi Gluck's success? In this week's parsha, we find that Yaakov Avinu, in Parshas Vayetze, comes to the Be'er, and he sees the shepherds standing there and not drawing water. He starts off, Achai me'ayinatem, brothers, from where are you? And then he gives them reproof, he gives them mussar. Why haven't you removed the boulder here for the water that you need here? He says to them, really strong mussar, Henayem Gadol, Loi Eis Ha'esav Hamikne, Hashku Atzain L'chura'u. Why are you standing here and not taking care of the sheep? Why aren't you watering them? And they told him they can't remove the rock. Why did they listen to him? Why did they speak to him? So the famous Vart people say, because he started off with Achai. He felt he was like a brother to them, and they felt that brotherhood. That's the secret of Rabbi Gluck's success and his organization. They really feel for that person. They become brothers with the parents, or the children become parents to the young children that they work with. They really feel for them. There's a real simas leiv. That's the atzlacha of the organization. Recognizing the idea and the inyan of klal uprat, prat uklal, and really feeling for them, becoming brothers, becoming sisters, becoming parents to all those that help. Kodesh Baruch Hu should help that Rabbi Gluck and HaRav should continue to have success. All those who help them should realize that they're helping an organization that is so important to Klal Yisrael, in helping so many hundreds of people find their way, helping them to connect to yeshivas and to schools that are right for them, finding therapists for them, helping them along the way of all challenges, and even continuing after the challenge has been met, to still mentor them and still be connected to them. Hatzlachu bracha v'chol tov.
Rabbi said something interesting. He said that it's about a timeless message over and over and over again. But I've been here for 12 years, same exact message. But the greats...
You're trying to say I'm boring.
The greats of any, inside of business or inside of anything, don't change, right? If you have to make something new, that means your product is not great. Something that is timeless for a reason.
Well, that's...
You don't have to be mechad. It's just over and over and over and over.
And hone it. You hone it.
And even there, but the same message that I needed to hear 10 years ago is the same message that another 22-year-old needs to hear right now. It didn't change. If it changed, it was flawed.
That's the challenge, by the way, when these rabbanim get up and sometimes you say they're repeating. You look at certain svarim and they repeat the same
over and
because
over.
that's still the message.
Not enough, but you have to hear it 172 times to click.
If it's foundational enough, then it applies in more and more.
And more. One of the things when I was younger and I learned svarim, so if I saw something that I learned already, a concept, so I gloss over it because I know that already. Now I learned the more svarim I see the same concept, the more important it is, and I slow down. Because why is everybody telling me this message? It has to be more foundational than I thought. And therefore I slow down.
I mean, Rabbi Dr. Twersky, Chalav Shalom, he used to say that I didn't write 70 books, I wrote one book 70 times.
Right.
What he meant by that, the theme that he was always writing about was the issue of self-esteem and a person's own feelings of inferiority exhibiting and kind of like showing up in every small area of life, whether it's addiction or whether it's becoming aggressive towards a spouse or whether it was, starting to, whatever it is the person's doing or getting involved in that was, unhealthy or destructive, it comes from like that one theme. And yeah, if you have one idea that you're talking about, and there could be different applications. What you heard at 22 is not what this guy needs to hear at 22, but the core of it, if you peel away all of the different, it's the same thing.
I'm going to segue, but just because I want to stick to sin. Lately I've been telling a lot of people that we think that the Yetzer Hara tells you to eat a cheeseburger, which he does, okay? And the Yetzer Hara will tell you to do a lot of various. I don't think we appreciate that he also tells you be insecure. And he also tells you to have bad midos. He also tells you to have emotional issues. It's the same thing. And therefore we have to build ourselves out of that just as much as we do anything wrong. And the messages, the foundational ones don't talk about Averis. The foundational ones are talking about being self-esteem and godless Adam, as well as shiftless Adam, and all the different messages. Because that's really the foundational stuff. I'm hoping in this bantering, we didn't prepare for this at all. You have an idea, not so much the work we do, but how we think. And obviously, if you like the way we think, then you'll like our work, and I guess vice versa as well. So what we would like to ask from everybody is first I have to thank everybody because the project, the fundraising project was doing very well. Everyone was very receptive. As a personal thank you, people picked up the phone. I cannot tell you how appreciative it is to me. As painful as it is for you to pick up the phone, it's more painful for me to pick up the phone. Everyone, I want to appreciate those that helped. I'd like to ask more people. Obviously, anyone that could help more would be very appreciative. There's certain parts of HaRav that bleed money. The girls program bleeds money. It just does. There's other programs. If there's anything of interest in any of the programs, please give me a ring. That's number one. Number two is be involved anyway. There's certain resources we need, which is not about money. Some human resources. The girls are dying to get someone to help with equine therapy. If you know of anything like that, that would be great. But there's a bunch of others. You want to hire some of our guys? I'll be very honest with the good, the bad, and the ugly. Hire some of our girls. All of this would be very helpful. But we'd also really like to know, forgetting about us itself, in terms of Klal Yisrael, be receptive to the fact there are challenges with young adults, teenagers, and believe it or not, older adults as well. Be kinder and calmer to them. Direct them in our way if you think that would be helpful, certainly. But certainly in your own, create your own little island of understanding, of learning the skills. And that way, it's what we try to do with Klal Yisrael, and that is to make the next generation a healthier generation. And I just want to leave off with one other comment. It's a conversation with Shmuel Kamenetsky. I asked him 7-8 years ago. I probably mentioned this in the last dinner video, but I'm going to say it again anyway. Should we make 100 people less unhealthy, or should we make 10 people healthy? Make 100 people less unhealthy, the burdens of parnasa and marriage and children, they may not stay less unhealthy. Make 10 people healthy, now you're now going to make their spouses and children, you'll end up with the same 100 healthy people. Our goal is not to be satisfied with making people a little less unhealthy, and as a result, our goal is to make the next generation healthier. I will say that. 20 years ago, I was taking kids for lunch. Today, I'm taking their kids for lunch. While it's a statement about how good we are, it's also a statement we're not good enough. Our hope is that whoever we're helping now, the next generation's not going to need us, and may we all merit a healthier Klal Yisrael, our own healthier family, and a better relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom. That it becomes sooner than later, of course. And we should all daven for good things.
Amen. Amen.